here is our two-dimensional array tester. So this is, if you're still a little bit confused on 2D arrays, definitely watch this and just do a few quick examples to help understand how these things work. And so if you look back at the notes from Monday, 7.5 notes, I'm just going to walk through those real fast here. So two-dimensional arrays, mostly you can think of it like a matrix, like rows and columns. And so you would just say like new int 3 rows 4 columns, new int 2D array. And you can think of it like this mostly in your mind. However, as it says here, Java does not actually have a 2D array type. And so what it is actually a 2D array is actually an array of arrays. It's an array, so each element is pointing to a separate array. This also kind of helps you to picture that. So that has a little bit of bearing. And when you do the AP test, there's a few questions that really get to that point. So you want to keep that in mind. That a 2D array is really just an array of arrays. So you can see that, like, this is an array. I'm just typing this in literally, where the first element is not like an int. It's not like an int array or a Boolean array, where the first element is like the number 5 or like true. The first element is this whole thing, and then the second element is this whole thing. And the third element is this whole thing. Okay, so it's 3 rows. So this is the first row, second row, third row, and then 4 columns. So the way to access the number of rows, you just go by the definition, right? The number of rows is 3, right? It's the length of this array, right? This array is called A in our case, right? A is the length, so 3 rows is the number of rows, right? It's the A dot length. It says it right here, A dot length. Whereas, what if we're trying to find the number of columns? Well, that's 4, and so how do you find that? That's like the length of each array, right? The length of each array is 4. So what you can do then is just grab this first element, A0's length, and that would give you 4, right? A0's length would be the number of columns. Okay, so A dot length is the number of rows, in this case it would be 3. A0's length, which is the number of columns, would be 4. And people had some good questions of what if, since I'm just typing this in, couldn't I create different amounts of columns for each of these rows? And you actually can, but we never will, and the AP test is never going to test any of that. Every 2D array would be perfectly rectangular, just like this. Okay, so yes, you can also do weird stuff like have a new 2D array with no columns actually set, so it's like 3 elements where each of them are just null, and then you can create the rows by hand. Other things pop up, such as that you can't like copy a 2D array with these normal arrays.copyIt method. What you have to do is walk through step by step and copy each row by hand. We'll see an example of that in our little example here. And then we'll cover this checkers game later in the year, but just want to point out 2D array types are often very nice for games and stuff like that. So if you have a game board, you can have a 2D array of ints or whatever, checker pieces or booleans, and fill them like this. Okay, so we'll talk about methods like this later on, but again, you can think of it most of the time like a grid like this, although again, technically, remember, it is just an array of arrays. So A.length gives you the rows, A0.length, right, or any of them really, we're just going to use A0, will give you the number of columns, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at our two-dimensional array tester. And so we have some test arrays here. I just wanted to practice with you. Okay, so this first one, see if you can create a new array, a new 2D array that has, that would look something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's really like, you picture it like a grid, right? 2D array. How would you do that? So pause the video, see if you can do that. How would you declare a literal 2D array with the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in there? Okay, so how would you do that? Well, first you start with the new int 2D array, and when you're declaring things literally, just like with the regular 1D arrays, you don't need to put the number of rows and columns because you're going to declare that like hard-coded. use the little curly braces. And then what you have to remember, you can't just go like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's like a 1D array. Remember, the definition is it's an array of arrays. And so the rows, each row is like a 1, 2, 3. This is like one element, right? 1, 2, 3. That whole array is like one element. And then 4, 5, 6, that's another element. Okay, so we can see this row is, it's like, so again, it's an array of ints, array of booleans, it's an array of arrays. So this is like row 1, and this is row 2, which helps explain, right? If you wanted to get the number of rows, you would grab this dot length. If you want the number of columns, you would grab a 0, 2 by 3, 0 dot length, and that would give you 3. All right, otherwise, if you want to just do the normal way of like specifying the number of rows and columns, you can just say new int, for example, 3, 3. Right, and that would fill everything with zeros. Or, for example, new int 4, 5. Okay. Now, if I was to go ahead and, actually this won't run, so you can either just watch the video if you want, or you can just fix this to return 0. If I run this right here, let me just run this real fast. I can see that even if I try to use my toString method, and to avoid doing this, you can also import java.util.arrays. Okay, so then you don't have to say this whole java.util business, you just arrays.toString. So I can't just use that because, again, you see that, okay, I've got this 4 by 5 array, but it instead of printing it out properly, like 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 5 zeros, 5 zeros, 5 zeros, it's just printing out garbage, right? Because that's each, this is the definition of a 2D array, right? Each one is an array of arrays. So this first element is an array, right? It's a point, so it's printing out that pointer, right? Because that's an object. An array is an object, so it's printing another pointer, another pointer, another pointer. So when you're dealing with 2D arrays, you can't just do this. What you have to do is go through each row individually and then print it out. So I can change this to for int I equals 0, I is less than, okay, again, how do I get the number of rows? It would be 4 by 5 dot length. Okay, now if I try it like that, again, that's just doing the same thing 4 times. That's not helpful. What I want to do is the first time print out the first row, second time print out the second row, third time print out the third row, and the fourth time print out the fourth row. So we're just going to go based off of this I here. So 4 by 5 I. Right? So that's going to print out this guy that first time, this guy second time, right? And then since it's only printing out a 1D array, it will actually print it out correctly, and we can see, there it is. Right? And you could test it. You could use the 2 by 3 instead. 2 by 3 dot length, print out 2 by 3. And you can see it works with numbers as well. Right? There's my 2 by 3. I'm going to do that. Okay. So to practice working with arrays, 2D arrays, this is just the basic practice here. Come down here to the bottom and see if you can write a method that would count the number of zeros in this guy. So for example, it should be 20. It's returning 0 right now, right? So let's say, let's start off with int count equals 0. So initialize, you have to initialize local variables. Return count. How would I go through each one of these things and count the number of zeros? So see if you can pause the video and figure out how to do that. Okay, so my hint, if you're stuck, think about you want to go through this row and go bam, bam, are you a 0, are you a 0, are you a 0, and then move on to the next row, are you a 0, are you a 0, are you a 0, and then move on to the next row. Notice you are going through every possible combination of row and column. Right? Row 0, column 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then row 1, column 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then row 2, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that should sound like a nested for loop, right? A nested for loop. So we can't always avoid nested for loops, so we're just going to roll with it. For int I equals 0, I want to go through every row. Remember, this is an array of arrays, so the number of rows would be, if this int array, 2D array is called vals, it would be vals.length. Oops. I is less than, oops. Vals.length, I++. Okay, And then for each of those, like for this first row, I want to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I want to go through each column. So for int j equals 0, so how do I grab the columns again? Remember, as an array of arrays, it would be the first, you just look at that first element length. So j is less than vals 0 dot length. That's the number of columns. J plus plus. Okay, so basically just look at this and see if you understand how it's going. It's going for each I, so for 0, it's going to go through j as 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then move on to I equals 1. J equals 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then j equals 2, 0, 1, 2, 3, 7. This is going to ensure that we hit each one, and then we can just check, all right, if vals at row I, column j, is equal to 0, I want to iterate count. Okay? And that's pretty much it. That allows us to walk through each one. If we run that now, it'll print out, yep, 0 is 20. Okay. The second thing I want you to do is try to make a one now where it's going to fill two-dimensional array with ones, except where the row is the same as the column. So fill those with, excuse me, threes. So it should look something like, if I call it with a, like a 3 by 3, it would be like 3, 1, 1, 1, 3, 1, 1, 1, 3. So just along this diagonal here, it would fill it with threes. So see if you can pause the video and do that. Okay, so hopefully you tried it. Basically, again, what you would want to do is I'm just going to copy this. I'm not returning anything. It's not returning an int, it's just returning a void, but we can do our same for loop. We'll go through each column, and this time, instead of like checking something, I'm going to like set this. So I'm going to go through row 0, column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then row 1, so on and so forth. So I'm going to go through these guys, and then I'm going to say, all right, if the row is the same as the column, so if row is I equals j, what I want to do then is I want to set, right? I want to put this on the left-hand side of the assignment statement, that to be a 3. Right? I'm taking a 3, I'm going to store it in here. Okay? Else, I'm going to set it to be a 1. Okay? And so if you run the tests, what you can see is that the first time it counts our zeros as 20. After we call our method, though, it's going to count it, and again, there's no zeros. So yeah, it looks like we did it, although just to be sure, let's print out the array. And so we can just copy this code from line 7 through 9, paste it in, and run it. And we can say, yep, so it had all these zeros, and we were able to count the zeros properly, and we were able to fill it properly with these two different methods. Right? So that was just the basics of two-dimensional arrays.